Under Harry Truman, 1949. Yes. Harry Truman's administration and the Fairness Doctrine led to a limitation on free speech. And this was in place until, oh man, I have to say till the end of the Reagan administration. This is rule by a federal commission. Now recently, the FCC has put net neutrality into place. In fact, I'm recording this on a Saturday, and yesterday was the first day it was officially in effect, this net neutrality. And basically, net neutrality will regulate the internet the same way the federal government regulates the copper wires that the telephone system uses. And the FCC put this in place on a 3-2 party line vote. And since the left wing has had a majority on the FCC for a while, it's reasonable to assume that this was done under direct pressure from Obama. This net neutrality is trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist, and it's trying to be fair. But every time the government tries to be fair about something, it winds up anything but fair. So now this net neutrality is basically telling people that they must allow others to use the network that they invested in and paid for without those other people having to pay for it. Now, if you invested in the servers and the pipelines, would you want someone to be able to use it for free? Do you expect to be able to use it for free yourself? When you pay your internet bill every month, you pay it based on your usage. If you use a certain amount of data, you pay so much. If you have another plan that allows you to use more data, you pay more. This FCC ruling says that's out the window. Everyone must use it equally, regardless of who is actually footing the bills. And that will stifle growth. That will stifle building more capacity into the internet when the people using it aren't even paying it, and the people paying for it aren't using as much as they're paying for. In a sense, it's another subsidy. And it also could be used as a political tool, as a First Amendment limitation, which in fact the Fairness Doctrine under Truman did. For years, there were no opposing viewpoints in the media because of the Fairness Doctrine. And this net neutrality has just the same danger as that. This really isn't about Comcast allowing equal access, although that is the facade that has been hanged on this. And too many people are falling for it. They think a place like Comcast is the problem when it is not. Everyone must pay for the bandwidth they use, whether it's a place like Netflix or individuals like you and I, and that is what is currently in place. And it's a market-driven thing, and it's what's led to the internet being what it is. And now the government's getting its grubby little fingers involved in this. The same thing is going to happen that always happens when government gets involved in something. The progress that's been made, the very internet that has been built by you and I paying our internet bills and these companies investing in servers and fiber optics, that's all out the window because government will now decide that people get equal access, even the people that haven't paid as much as the people that get access to more bandwidth. And that will lead to increased usage, but not increased revenue, and it will cause stagnation. The internet will not grow in capacity, and there is a capacity to it. Servers have a certain amount of capacity, and fiber optic cables have a certain capacity. And as people use more and more of that capacity, and they download more and more videos or use it in whatever ways they are, that capacity, and as more and more people get access to the internet, that required capacity will go up. But when you have people using it that aren't paying for it, there's no money to increase the capacity of it, as has been in the past with this market-driven system. Now, I watched a video by CEO Karp, the CEO of Tumblr, and I'll include the link to that, and that is one of the most asinine, dumbest videos I've ever seen of a CEO or just about anyone else. He shows such a fundamental misunderstanding of it, characteristics of this and of the problems involved here, and when he's taken to task on it by the interviewers over at MSNBC, he just gets this deer in the headlights look about 2 minutes into this, and it just lamely says, oh, that's not really my area of expertise. But the fundamentals of it are really no different than any other supply and demand problem, any other commodity. So it doesn't even take a particular amount of expertise. It's supply and demand and who's paying for it, and if you require people to be allowed access to something they aren't paying for, that will lead to a shortage. I don't know, Egg McMuffins, say. You go and pay your $3 for 2 Egg McMuffins, and you get 2 Egg McMuffins. Now what happens if someone steps in and says, okay, but that's not fair to the people that may not be able to get Egg McMuffins, and so they start requiring that people that aren't paying for Egg McMuffins get them. Well, that's going to lead to a shortage of Egg McMuffins, but it's not going to lead to an increase in revenue for McDonald's. That will decrease the profit that McDonald's makes on those. It really is that basic. And it could even cost McDonald's to lose money if hordes of people show up and wanting their free Egg McMuffins. Same thing with the internet. The internet, obviously with the servers and fiber optics and all that, obviously is much more high-tech than breakfast foods at the fast food place. But the principle holds the same, that if people are using it that aren't paying for it, you're going to have a shortage of whatever that is. And this is a problem with it. And this Karp, that's the CEO of Tumblr, does not even understand this. I'll include the link to this because that is really just incredibly, I don't know how to put it. It's just incredible that he is that ignorant about how markets work. And the MSNBC people interviewing him really took him to task on that. And they just logically backed him into a corner. And like I said, his lame response was, oh, that's not really my area of expertise. And he had that, from that 2 minutes or so in, he had that deer in the headlights look. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit off track here. But the thing about this, the fundamental thing about this, aside from the problems it creates in the market, but the very idea of something like the FCC is really, really getting to be problematic. And it's rules that the government sets, but in typical government fashion, they grant exceptions to these rules. And that is about as un-American as it gets right there, because this is supposed to be a nation that has rule of law. And the law is supposed to apply to everyone equally. But with things like the Fairness Doctrine, or this Net Neutrality, or so many of them are environmental regulations, that there's people, and tax rates and electric rates and whatever, that through subsidies or breaks on regulations, that a favored few are exempt from these rules. And that is a political favor. It's nothing to do with the free market. It's nothing to do with who can operate a business more efficiently than the next person. It's about who can get a special favor from the government. And that is not a free market. And that is what happens with all these burdensome rules, is that they make it difficult or impossible to run a business. And then someone comes and petitions the government for a break on it. But the government gets to decide who gets that break and who doesn't. It is government management of the economy rather than a free market. And really the heart of this is administrative law. It's administrative. It's an administrative takeover of law rather than the legislature or the judiciary passing laws and deciding on their constitutionality. And this is very, very dangerous. I can't emphasize this enough. This is something that the founding fathers of America were aware of, these dangers. The founding fathers of America were aware of these dangers. I mean, this goes back to the founding of this nation. And I don't think a place like the EPA or the FCC should even exist if people in Congress cannot take the time and the effort to debate something and pass it into law. It doesn't need to be law. Our very system in America is designed so that it is difficult to pass a law. And that is so people are left alone to live their lives in freedom. But when you pass it off to something like the FCC or the EPA, or any of the other of these federal agencies, you undermine the very idea behind our nation. If you look at it and you read the history of America, that in the beginning of this republic, and as we were trying to establish ourselves as a separate nation from England, this is something that was very much discussed in English constitutional history. This is something kings would do, is establish laws that placed a huge burden on people. And then he'd decide who might be exempted from these laws and who would not. So some of the king's subjects were favored over others under this kind of a system. And this is what the founding fathers of America sought to undo. And here we are doing the same things to ourselves now. This is wrong. It's un-American. It's not about the rule of law. It's about who can curry the most favor with the government. And that isn't freedom. That isn't a free market. That isn't a fair rule of law applied equally to all citizens. And this net neutrality is just a digital reincarnation of the Fairness Doctrine, and it will, as people will find over time, undermine progress, undermine the upgrading of the internet as it is needed when people start using more and more data, and it will undermine free speech because the government controls access to the internet rather than the current way of doing things, which allows anyone who can pay the bills to access the internet and speak the way they like with what they pay for.